Hey everyone, and welcome to another Factorio Friday Facts, number 401, New Terrain, New Planet. I'm the Exterminator, and thank you for joining me. And this is an exclusive one by Earendel, and it was honestly quite a surprise, but a welcome one. So, this is basically an overhaul of Novice as we know it, and it's very, very long. So a few things here. First off, it's a very long Friday Facts, so there's going to be quite a large amount of summarization. Now, I do want to just make a point in saying that is not because it is bad in any way or even boring. I did read through the whole thing myself, and it was honestly a great read, and I really appreciate Earendel putting this much time and detail into this. But for video format, we would be here for probably literally 45 minutes, an hour if I just read this straight through word for word because it is long and I'm a slow reader. So I'm just going to get that out of the way and say that. But honestly, Arendelle has just done an absolutely amazing job with all of this, and essentially all of the generation in terrain and stuff is being kind of reworked on Novice, and it looks really good. And we start off here basically. It just says there's 5 new planets in the expansion. Surprise! So I honestly wasn't really expecting this, but at the same time, I'm not super surprised because when compared to the new planets, it did look kind of not great. So it makes sense they're doing this. I just honestly didn't really expect it. That like I just didn't really think it would be something they'd get around to. But this is awesome. So first off, I love the fact Earendel starts off with a great Firefly quote. If you haven't seen Firefly, you need to watch it. It's an amazing show. But it goes into saying the first planet you arrive on is a strange new land rich with iron, copper, coal, stone, oil, and uranium. Everything starting factory needs and more. There's also water, fish, grass, and trees. Yes, there's a fertile land, and we will thrive. We'll rule over this land, and we will call it this land, Novice. So that was a Firefly reference. I smiled a lot when I first read this. But basically, the new planet Novice is similar to the current 1.1 version of the map, but there's some substantial updates. Hopefully, this is a surprise for you, which it was. And then he said because the updates to the base map weren't planned at all, it just got harder and harder to not make changes after getting more experience with other plans and seeing how things were like broken and missing a Novice. So for clarity, these changes affect the 2.0 version in general and are not exclusive to the expansion. So whether you buy the expansion or not, when 2.0 comes out, you will get these changes, which is awesome. And then this has actually been a solo project for Arendelle on the side, and I kind of just started it one evening and got deep into it, and we'll just go right in. So essentially, what I'm going to do is just kind of maybe read like the first couple sentences or paragraph of a section and then just go into what changed and kind of what it means for the game, again, rather than just reading every single like sentence in the whole thing. But essentially, the deserts in Novice are kind of boring, right? You know, we had the new kind of desert areas in Fulgura, and they look really good, and they have great decoratives, and just the terrain looks really nice and stuff in comparison to this. So Arendelle says, you know, they weren't a fan of the grassy desert, so they inquired about changing it, but it seemed like this was an uncomfortable topic that no one really wanted to get into. And one evening, he basically just got into it. So we are getting new dunes, and you can see the old ones here on the left. So this is what we currently have, and the new ones are over here. Now, alone, these don't look, I mean, really, they don't look that much different or even that fantastic, but when you actually put them on a map, it does look good. So the result is they look good on all 3 sand types. So you can see here we have them, which looks honestly quite good. I like this a lot. It's definitely seems like more of a contrast, where they kind of stand out more, which is really, really nice. And then as we bring the slider all the way to the left, we see this, and we also get a little spoiler. And I feel like this was definitely on purpose because it just seems like this maybe isn't that like this isn't on accident. And actually, maybe I'm looking at these backwards. Maybe this is the. I feel like this is the new one because this definitely looks different. But then this one has a new icon, so no, because the one, if we drag it to the right, Okay, maybe those are the old ones. I just don't recognize them. But anyway, let's go ahead and see if we can zoom in here to this and look. So these are all like major new buildings. Now, the centrifuge is obviously exclusive to Novice, I would say. We know what that is. And then the foundry, which is for Volcanus. And then we have something that we don't know. There's like that yellowish building down there in the left. That, my guess, would be something from the kind of foresty planet that we're probably going to get. Maybe some sort of like biochemical plant or something like that, bioplant. And then we have the electromagnetic plant. And then down here, we have the last thing, which is maybe some sort of, I saw speculations on some sort of like cryogenic something or other, maybe some sort of new lab or something on like the icy planet. So just a little Easter egg there that I honestly didn't notice the first time until I read through the comments on Reddit and such. But pretty cool. I'd love to hear your guesses on what these two new ones are. But that's just a nice little addition to the Friday Fact. So essentially, there were missing decoratives here, and there's just like a lot that went into it. I mean, you can see there's all kind of, I mean, there's like, this is like a 12D type of thing or something. This is really crazy. And like I said, I can't really read all of this, but basically what I gather from this is there was a ton of work that went into doing this entire update. So the old system had an extra limitation in that it can't do decorative groupings, like having large variants in the middle of a cluster and small ones further out. It wasn't really an issue on its own to deserve an upgrade, but being able to improve this is another side benefit. So we kind of see some examples here. So the new system has everything remapped so that everything can be placed, but that's the tip of the iceberg. Things are moved around to accentuate certain areas of the map. Deserts are drier, some arid areas have more red plants, other areas with more white plants. Grass areas, there are many subregions with different mixes of plants, more clustering, which is nice. Variety on the map is always good. So that's just a little change. There are bigger changes we get down here. So now we get into cliffs, which is probably one of the biggest changes here. And we all know cliffs are not great. Like, they're not super fun to play with. Most people, I would say, turn them off. Maybe not when you first play the game because you don't know any better, but they're not super helpful. Like, sometimes they can be helpful, but they're not as helpful as you would think. And then they're usually just in the way, honestly, and you end up just turning them off in your future playthroughs. And this is essentially what Earendel was saying in here and wanted to fix that. So at the 1.1 current cliffs, high cliffness to show the lines, just, to accentuate that. And then basically, like Earendel said here, and like I said, if we're stuck with cliffs on Nauvis because you don't unlock click explosives in the expansion until a later planet, if that's the case, then you should, at least get the most use out of them as you can and have them be the least annoying. So now we get mesa terrain. So the first attempt was based around the idea of having a series of defensible plateaus. They'd have some cliffs around them, but they wouldn't follow the same lines as the lakes. To do this, land above water was mostly flattened, and then hills were added to the existing land separately. So this starts to look a little better. Cliffs of Nauvis rebuilt attempt 1, high cliffs to show the lines. So it's not quite as all over the place, but could still use some improvements. And it said here what's really needed is longer unbroken cliffs, but fewer cliffs in total. Sadly, there was no way to do that. Let's go on a tangent for a moment. So precise cliffs, and basically we can see an example here with smoothing. So the first change to C++ code, and actually let's just move up here because there's actually a really good thing to read here. So usually says I usually try not to look at the C++ code because every time I do, I get compelled to start changing things like fluid mechanics. So I'm hoping, and I'm not the only one, there's a lot of talk with this, I am very, very much hoping that this is some sort of hint that maybe, Earendel's like pushing to get in there and change some fluid stuff, or maybe it's already been done and this is just a hint towards that. But overall, I really, really hope that the fact this was mentioned, because it didn't have to be, is that there's some sort of fluid mechanic change coming in a future Friday Facts and for the update, because it's just it needs it. It really needs it. So that's just an interesting thing. But basically, the first change Earendel actually did make is the change to C++ code was adding a way to disable smoothing on some surfaces. Suddenly, all the cliffs snapped to their proper place. Cliff problem on Factorio had been plaguing me for weeks, so to say this was a relief is an understatement. So this is with cliff smoothing, I believe. Please slide the white bar left and right, so satisfying. And then this one here. So I think it just kind of cleans it up, maybe. Like, I mean, I see some differences for sure. Like how this juts out, and then there's an opening here on part of it, and it's not there, or more maybe it's just more clear. But what we get down here is Freeform Cliffs. So you can see an example here is the left is lots of cliffs, but none are useful, and then the right is fewer cliffs, and it has potential to be useful, right? I would much rather this than this, because again, I mean, this is kind of what we get now, and it's really bad because you can't do anything with any of this. But here, you could use this, create a defensible type of wall off of this cliff, which is quite nice, and the rest of this is usable. Right, and then the main plan was to make a small number of long cliffs, as mentioned earlier. Fewer of them means they wouldn't get in the way so much. Long unbroken cliffs would be a better barrier against enemies, but it's also a better barrier to your base expansion, and that's a good thing. So this is just kind of a debug visualization of cliff plateaus. Dark is low area, bright is high area. So you can kind of see this is very much like what we have on Fulgura, what the plateaus are like. And then this leads into another nice opportunity. The cliff elevation at this point is completely separate from the water elevation, but when you have a line of cliffs heading to the water, you expect the coastline to be different, showing that the area above the cliff would extend further into the water as that area is higher. So that's what Earendel did. The cliff elevation is added to the water elevation. This creates some nice terrain features, river-like sections that lead to canyons, peninsulas guarded by cliffs, and some nice new islands. And this is honestly one of the best shots in this whole Friday Facts, and there are a lot, but this just looks really nice. This is something we would like never get now, or at least it wouldn't look this nice now, and I love this a lot. This just looks so good, and I really do hope there are more rivers like this on Novice and maybe some other planets, because it just adds to the environment. It really looks good. You can see here a canyon-like formation again, which maybe not super buildable, but honestly still more useful than what we have now. And the nice thing is that this is like all there is in terms of cliffs. There's not cliffs like all over the place in here, which is kind of what we would have currently. So this is definitely a nice improvement. And then we go into remaking the terrain. So problem is that adding the cliff elevation to water elevation decreases the amount of water. The water level can be adjusted to add more water back, but that mostly floods the canyon areas. It's a main disadvantage of plateau shapes being surrounded by lower land. If the water level is higher, it all ends up as disconnected islands. That's obviously not ideal for Factorio because you get cut off from biters and need landfill or elevator rail to connect areas. And it's better if they mostly stay connected. So problem, plateaus tend to create islands. So we just went into that. And then you can see here, from Pride Facts 390, Earendel already had this solution. And on the left here, we have the same raw plateaus is before. The actual terrain of plateaus mixed with other layers is on this side. So you can see, obviously, we don't just get a bunch of islands, and then the cliffs are much better than they currently are. They're not quite as all over the place and a bit more uniform and like longer sections of them. You can see, notice on the mixed terrain, coastline gets affected by the plateau shapes, and inland areas get cliffs in the same pattern. So yeah, that is definitely an improvement for sure. And then hold up, there's a guy just beyond tweaking the terrain for better cliffs is going towards Overhaul territory. If it's already going to change that much, let's just make the Novice map the best it can be. So that's what I did. Let's start with the water slide. The minimum amount of water is almost all land, but there are occasional small lakes that are few and far between, right? So minimum water, 100% scale, basically, like Earendel said, you get almost no water. And then at max water, 100% scale, you get kind of just almost like one big island with some additional islands, which is more what you'd expect. And this is much, much better, in my opinion, than what we currently have. The current setting for water and stuff in elevation and all that stuff, it's not super intuitive. in my mind, and doesn't always quite do what you may want it to do. And this seems like it probably will work a lot better in that regard. And then we have the other extreme, minimum water here, 25% scale, and max water, 25% scale, where you get very little land actually at all. So again, though, it at least kind of does maybe more what you would think it would do. But then there is a dead end. A lot of things are working really well. The terrain looks much better. It was better to play on, but it wasn't perfect. A canyon path blocked by water, right? So we start getting issues with this, and you can see here like a path through a forest blocked by more cliffs. And I mean, this one, this is a good example actually of how they do, in the new version, that the cliffs are just longer continued sections, which is great, except for of course when they're blocking your only path through the forest. So, but this is kind of becomes a problem. And the problem there is the cliff system, the land system, and the tree system don't know anything about each other. That's not really solvable, though, because the tree system will use still use the same peaks definition as the decoratives mentioned earlier. And again, you can see a land bridge blocked by trees. So I changed that too. And this is a very common thing with this Friday fact. So essentially, forest noise, and basically the more that Earendel looked in the system, the more problems I found. In general, it was a bit better because most of the trees were capable of spawning, but there was one tree that was completely excluded because it required temperature that didn't exist on the planet. So that's kind of hilarious. That I think my understanding is like this whole time there's been a tree that's just never actually been able to exist because the temperature it needed to spawn didn't actually exist on the planet, which is kind of funny. But you can see the cave box shows a new trace placement volumes, except for the box for one tree that has been put back to its original place. Can you guess which one it is? I actually don't. Maybe a red desert tree or something. And you can see, do any of these trees look new to you? So, I mean, to me, it's like, I mean, not, without a comparison shot, I actually can't necessarily pinpoint which ones look newer. We definitely have these currently. I want to say like maybe these ones. Or maybe they're just referring to, Earendel's referring to all these shots. So we can just get some more shots of trees here and stuff like that. All this looks nice, which is great, but it's really all for the end goal of integrating the trees with other systems for better gameplay. So now we go into natural paths, and this is fantastic. I really, really like this part. So basically, the plateaus actually use a very similar system to the ridges, but it's inverted. The ribbon lines, instead of being high points, are low points, essentially the canyon areas between the hills. If you're following a cliff edge from below, you'll often get funneled into those areas, so it's important that these areas are not blocked by trees. So they're also added to paths. Dense forests are also a problem for moving around, especially if you set the tree density slider to the max and try to move in a moist section of the landscape. An extra set of lines for the forest trails were added to the set of paths too. So basically, you can see on the left here, the left, so red is canyon path, blue is land bridge path, and green is tree path. And then on the right, landscape with maximum tree settings to more clearly show the paths. And first off, this looks amazing. And secondly, it just is so much better that you don't have these like seemingly endless forests you can't run through it all. This actually gives you some paths, and I would say it's potentially more realistic even too. So this is really, really nice looking. And then there are a few exceptions where excuse me, where things block each other, but these tend to be coincidence. For example, terrain just happens to connect between two lakes, making what is effectively a land bridge, but because it was not created by the special land bridge system, the route is not protected and has a chance to be clogged with trees, which is fine if it's just on occasion, honestly. I don't think that's that big of a deal. However, the true test of this for me was to set trees and cliffs to maximum settings and try to navigate the map by car, and you know what? That's actually a really cool map to move around now. Yeah, and I mean, it looks like it would be. This is really, really nice. So here are the results. So map, we have a bunch of pictures. So map at a 100% scale here looks pretty dang good. And then a map at 50% scale, note when changing scale, only elevation style features are resized, things like or stay in the same place, right? So this is like kind of some more water and more cliffs and stuff in general. And you can see this map at 25% scale, and again, even more so, kind of exaggerated version of this. And then down here, another map at 25% scale. This one's more desert, of course, and some more pictures. You can see like we have, this is definitely more useful. Like you could just throw a wall here and here, and you have a very nice sensible area, and the cliffs aren't cluttering all the other areas at the same time too. Kind of another example here. And then we have like a nice little like canyon area here, and you can see some paths through the forest. So this is really, really nice. Now, actually looking at it on the map, I would say maybe the paths are a bit too big. Of course, if you make them too small, it makes it like impossible to navigate with a car or something anyways. So maybe making them a little bigger, or sorry, a little smaller would be my preference, but definitely better than having no paths at all. I will say that. But this is just really nice. And we are at the end here. So, yes, Earendel clearly put in a lot of work into this and been testing it heavily through the entire process. It's finally working really well. There's still more testing to do because it's such a big change and affects everyone in a different way, in a very significant way. There's some minor things to do a bit later, like more patchy forest edges, but that's not a significant change to gameplay. The safety net for all these changes is the new terrain is extremely customizable, which is really great. I mean, I don't see how that could possibly be any sort of negative for anybody. This is, more ways to customize the terrain is something that I have wanted for quite a while. And then even if you don't like some settings, it's easy to adjust the map the way you like it. For example, I made some extra changes to the cliff frequency slider so that a value below 100 will remove cliffs from huge regions of the map, which is nice. And then if you really don't like the new terrain, there's a setting to just turn back on the old terrain. So the devs are, as always, just being awesome with leaving some options in there in case you like to play a different way. If you just for some reason really don't like all these new changes, you can just use the old terrain, which is great. So yeah, I mean, maybe this isn't like a super I shouldn't even say thrilling. Some parts of it were honestly really quite good, almost thrilling. But this is maybe not like, I would say maybe not as flashy of a Friday Facts, but it is really good. Having Novice terrain reworked is great. It hasn't been like redone in a very, very, very long time, and compared to the other planets, it did really seem to kind of fall behind. And all these changes, in my opinion, are great. Now, I would love to hear what you guys think. Are there any of these you don't like? Do you think you're maybe just going to play with the old terrain, not use this at all? But overall, less cliffs and more useful cliffs is fantastic. I think I may definitely do a playthrough or two with cliffs on in 2.0 just to see what it's like. And I imagine this is going to be the case for a lot of people. I love the way we can get like more river type formations and stuff on the map, like was shown earlier in the post. And also the paths and trees will be super helpful and do look pretty nice as well for the most part. So the whole map regen, overvamp and stuff for Novice is fantastic. Like I said, I was not really expecting this. So this was a super exciting thing to wake up to here. But there's this one. As always, I really look forward to the next one. And just huge thanks to Earendel for putting in so much work to this. This is not just the changes, but the Friday Facts too. And all of these are fantastic in my opinion. And if you're excited for these, definitely feel free to leave a like on the video. If you're new, welcome. And feel free to subscribe to keep up with future content. And until next time, I look forward to seeing you all, and do take care.